Hi everyone, so I am going to do a tutorial today on how we can create tracks that are inspired by the Perlon sound. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to just have a little bit of a chat about Perlon and listen to a few reference tracks that I've got lined up. And then what we're going to do from there is we're going to go through a loop that I've pre-made and spent a bit of time on. And then we're going to look at how we can just knock up a quick, simple groove, particularly focusing on the drums and things like that. So I'm sure most of you will have heard of Perlon. It's a label that was originally founded in Frankfurt. Zip, Markus Nikolai, and a geezer called Chris as well. Obviously, Zip and Markus Nikolai, the most known behind the label, but it's such an important label, and it's been around. I think the first release was like 1997, so it's like 25 years old, and it's always pushed the boundaries of minimal and techno music, basically. And a lot of my favourite releases are from this label. It's so hard to just pinpoint my favourites on there, but I think in terms of like just an all-rounder, this label is probably one of the best out there in my opinion. So what I wanted to do is focus on the earlier sound and show you how you might go about producing it with modern technology. So what I wanted to do is show you a few reference tracks. This is one that has heavily inspired the loop that I've made. So let's just have a little flick through and have a listen to this. So there's very few elements in there. A lot of the textures and things that you can hear in the background are from the way that it's been processed. So there's lots of reverb on there. We've got some trippy spoken vocals. I assume that it's been done by the artists themselves. And this is, I believe it's Baby Ford, this, and someone else. I'm not sure who. Minimal Man. But yeah, and there's really flat drums that kicks just flat, almost acoustic like. But yeah, absolute tune that. This is one of my favourites. This is a ridiculous track. It's by Akufin, however you want to pronounce it. He's a Canadian artist. He's still operating now, but his earlier stuff's absolutely ridiculous. And this is just a killer track. So let's have a listen to this. So a lot of the tracks are glitchy, they're trippy, they're psychedelic, they are fast paced. That's a little bit slower, that one, but if you listen to this is super quick. You got like one shot stabs in there. This is chopped up vocals. I think he actually records hours of radio and then just like, it's called micro sampling, that technique, and he's one of the pioneers of that sort of technique, I think, in underground dance music. So yeah, a wicked tune. And then there's this one from Panty Tech. I mean, absolutely ridiculous sampling and the way they created a mood there. I just got goosebumps listening to that. What a tune. I can't recreate that, but we're going to do our best today to sort of focus on that sound. And I think that like the sampling's so trippy and it's psychedelic. It's properly psychedelic. It's really loopy. It's quick. It's just unique. So yeah, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the link, the loop that I've got And then we'll break down that. We'll look at the style of the sound, the production that we can use to achieve something similar, and then we'll start something from scratch. So let's get cracking. So this is a loop that I've put together in a Perlon style. What I'll do, as always, is I'll just play through the loop in full so that you can hear how it sounds, and then what we'll do is we'll go through each individual channel, look at the processing, look at the sound sources, any sort of synthesis or sound design that's gone on. And after that, we'll look at how we can just build a loop from scratch. So let's have a listen to this first of all. Okay, so I tried to get it as close to the Perlon sound as possible. It's just sort of like a little simple loop, really, just keeps things rolling, but it's mainly the sort of technical side of things I want to talk about, and the sounds that I've used rather than the creative idea, which might need a little bit of work. But if we start with the kick here, so I'm just going to solo that. It's a nice little, it's almost a little bit flat, the kicks that that you hear in these sorts of tracks, if you think about back to the reference tracks that we looked at. But for this, rather than use a sample, I've used this this plugin, which is by let me think about who this is by now. So if I search for it, Big Kick, yeah, it's part of Plugin Boutique, so they've got some really good plugins. But this one in particular is really good. So if I solo it, it just gives you so much control over the kick. So I don't lose the original kick. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate the channel like that and solo it so that we can just play with it a little bit. So inside Plugin Boutique, you've got these options for which sample you want to use. You can layer two samples together if you wanted to, but I've gone for like a 909 short attack kick basically, and then it gives you this option of how to control the sample. So there's a high pass filter, so you can take out some of that click at the beginning, and also the decay here. And then you've got the typical amp controls, so your ADSR. So if I just play with those a little bit. From the decay. So you've got loads of control. You've got the pitch here as well. So you can really shape the kick sounds in this, and it's I find it's got loads of control, and particularly for this sort of style, I was able to get that nice flat sounding Perlon kick that's got a really short decay. So going back to the one that I used, it's almost like a bit of an acoustic kick, but it's still got that bottom end to thump through. And then I've added some swing onto all of the drums, because one of the things that you'll find in this Perlon sound is that everything's kind of really swung. So if I was to solo, sorry, just going to cross that out for now. I'm going to solo just all the drums here so that you can hear how they sound. So there's a bit of variation on the kick there, and with the swing it sounds really nice. So sections like this, for example. And then we've obviously got the swing on the hats and everything, which we'll get to. But yeah, so nice and swung. I think the swing that I actually used was part of Ableton's groove pool as usual. So it's the 16th swing, and it's like quite a high swing there. So it's like 68. And then with the bass line, if I had that in. It's got that groove, and we're at like 133 BPM. So like a lot of the reference tracks that I showed you, they're quite pacey, quite fast. And with the minimal style, it adds a lot of energy to it, I think. So really distinctive Perlon sound to be going almost like techno-y, rather than just the stripped back minimal house that you hear a lot of more recently. So yeah, in terms of the clap, there's two different clap layers. So the second clap, if I go into the MIDI clip, is layered with a different clap with a lower velocity. So yeah, you get that extra clapping just for a bit of variation. I've added in an echo boy on there, and I've brought the dry wet right down, and it's just like part of the drums. It's like a tight mod room, it's called the preset, and I've just played with the groove a little bit so that it fits. And then what I've gone and done is I've added in just an EQ just to roll out the lows. I mean, it could do with a bit of compression on there to control it, so, because obviously when the second clap is happening, it's going to be a bit louder, but that's something I'd do at the mix down stage just to control those transients so it's not sticking out in that second clap. But that's it, and then that clap rolls through. I've also got the Sound Toys little plate on there, which is really good. I've used if you go into the drum presets on here, the full gate-ish one, and then I've just brought the dry wet right down. So if I was to... So yeah, I thought that sounded pretty nice. And that's it, that's the clap. So the kick and the clap together. And then we'll move on to the hats here. So what I've done with the hats, because I find that a lot of the Perlon stuff has a bit of a human feel, I've added in if you go to velocity, there's an add some random preset. I've put it quite high so that we get a nice little groove going on. So with lots of swing on there, it sounds pretty cool. What it does need, I'll add this in now, it's just an EQ. So roll out the lows, and there's some like resonant peaks, like that one in particular. And you could probably take out some of the highs as well. But what I have done is I've also added in the UAD Studer tape machine. So if I take that processing off, you'll hear what it's doing to the sound. Just add in a bit of character to it. I've used a lo-fi fuzz preset, but all the presets in this are great, and you can get it on subscription now without needing the hardware, which is cool. So yeah, that just sort of chugs along. And then what I have done just to add energy into this sort of little breakdown section is I've added in this extra hi-hat. So if I just play that from here. So we get that hi-hat in there, just a bit more open, so it adds more energy. So yeah, I think that sounds really cool. And then we've got these little perks. So these happen at different points, but I wanted something to groove into this little vox that we got. So I add this in here, so it sort of bounces off that, because the best sort of groove of this, to get the groove of this sort of thing, everything's got to bounce off and talk to each other. So this is what I've tried to achieve with that. Like that. So with the context of everything else, you've got... and then it changes in the second half, so you have like this. So it's just just wait for that sound to stop. So yeah, it's just the position of it changed. But in terms of the samples, I'll just go over those while we're here. Quite specific sort of sound really, and I've really shortened the decay on the clap. So that's come from Beat PPL District 909 sample pack, and the other one has come from I believe that one is yeah, so it's come from the Hyper Minimal House sample pack, which is really good for little one shots. The hats I've taken all from the same Minimal House sample pack, including that one, and then the perks have also come from that as well. So some really nice little one shots, but it's important to shorten them, I think, shorten them the decay and that sort of thing. So in terms of the perks, there's no processing on there, but again, I've added in quite a lot of that, add some random. So with the bass line then, let's just solo that. So it's a filtered bass basically, and for that I used the UHE Diva, which is a really powerful synth. It's just one of the presets actually, so like it's just a picked bass, because in a lot of this Perlon stuff, particularly the early stuff, it almost sounds like a real bass, and the drums are a bit acoustic, so you're going for that human feel, that live instrumentation feel. So with a picked bass, I used that preset because I thought it sat nicely. I just pulled the frequency down a little bit, so it's almost like a muted electric bass. When we make the loop afterwards, we'll see if we can try and find like a nice acoustic sounding bass that might fit nicely. But for this track in particular, I just thought it worked nicely. Quite a low decay on there, and then it's like, yeah, just a grooving bass line. So with everything else, it just sat nicely with the kick. And then what I did is I used the track spacer to just sidechain the kick, but only take away the frequencies that we need to, rather than sidechaining the whole signal. With the perk synth that we've got here then, I just copied the bass notes over, which I do quite often. I copied the same notes over, and then I just flicked through some presets. So I went into the drum perk presets and just got this like little snare thing. So layered with the bass, it just gives it a bit of mid, high mids, and then with everything else, it just sort of filled out the space for that second little bit of variation. So it just fills out, because obviously we've taken out the vocal here, so we needed to fill it with something else. So this is how that sounds. You could even go further with something like that and add in like a volcano or like a filter or something that's going to add some modulation. So something like this. Do you know what I mean? So it gives it... And again, I'm just flicking through presets there to find something that works. I'm very much a preset surfer. You know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that in my eyes. you know, it's how you use them and how it fits in the context of the track. And then I've got this little texture loop here. What I did do with this though is I right click, quantize, and then I put the groove, the swing on there, which worked well because it fit with the groove, and I just shortened it. That's come from the Minimal House pack, just to add things in, so you almost don't notice it's there. But if I took it out, the track's missing something. So sometimes it's those little finishing touches that almost go unnoticed, but they're what fills the track out. And so yeah, that's one of the layers that I added in there. Also, you've got 3 different Vox samples, so I'll play each one to you and then we'll look at the sources where they came from, the processing that I used. So there's this first one here that sounds like this. So that came from the Elab XTC files of techno, and it's just in the sound tools folder, and it's called Vox Chordish. You can see it just down at the bottom here if I hover over it, where it's come from. So yeah, basically there's that one. Then we've also got this one, and then this one here too. So looking at the processing on these then, I've used the Timeless 3. Now if you go into the Timeless 3, it's a delay unit from FabFilter, and you go into the special effects, you can add some pretty interesting stuff into it. So if I was to solo that, if we go into the first one, sorry, if I was to solo that, all those sounds are coming from the delay. So if I take the delay off, this is how it sounds. So it's added in loads of like, and the vocal then adds some extra texture to the rest of the track just from a little one shot like that. So I'll turn all the processing off and you'll hear how that sounds. So much better with the timeless on. Also, this is without the micro shift. And then this is with. So what the micro shift does is it just adds width to something in the stereo field. So it's a really cool plugin actually. And then finally I've took the low end out with the Pro Q3. And that's the processing on that one. Second Vox hasn't got any processing really because that's part of the groove. And then we've got this one here, which I've added a filter on. So this one. So I turn the filter off. Just sounded a little bit too dark really, so I wanted to roll out the low end. Could do with rolling out the top end, sorry. Could do with rolling out the low end though. Just in case we've got some sub kicking about. And again, just use this timeless. I've gone in modulation and this crispy vocal width. But then what I've also done with this is sent it to this send down here, which has just got an Ableton delay on it. So it grooves nicely. In terms of this, where I got the other samples from, I believe they've all, yeah, so this one's come from a sample pack called Sonic Foundry. It's the Trance NRG Volume 1. And again, there's mostly sample CDs. It's just, what I tend to do is I search for Vox like that and I go in all results. But I've just taken the first part of it, and you can flick through all your vocal samples there in your library if you click all results rather than searching a specific folder. So you can find all sorts of stuff just from doing that, I've found. And then finally, this sample has come from the ecstasy files of techno, again, like this one here. So yeah, it's mainly 90s sample CDs, and we're looking for those like pitch down for the Perlon sound, like the pitch down spoken word vocals. I could even use this microphone that I've got here and record me saying something and then pitch it down and maybe use like I don't know, like one of the shifters to pitch things down. Do you know what I mean? It's just experimenting with things like that. So and yeah, the resonator and things like that. So you can be creative, and if you've not got the samples, just record yourself saying something and yeah, just pitch it down and process it like I've done here. I've also got this little it's from a Trauma sample pack, that the Sample Market one. but I've just taken, because if you look at the whole sample, it's just really long loop. But I liked the start of that. It had like an acoustic feel that I was liking, and there's a lot of reversed stabs in the Perlon stuff, so that's something that I was looking for specifically. So I used that. Not much in the way of processing apart from this micro shift, just to give it a bit of the sense that it's wide, and it just sounds great, brings it out of the mix a little bit. Then we've got this stab, which sounds like this. And I've just got this from the Minimal House sample pack. It's one of the one-shot synth hits, number 8. And I've just loaded it into a sampler, played a little rhythm in with everything else. And then I've added in a little plate on there. Could bring that down a little bit more, I think. And also the micro shifter again from Sound Toys, which is great. So yeah, definitely recommend getting all the Sound Toys stuff if you don't have it already. But and then in terms of the EQ, I've just done making sure there's nothing kicking out in the super highs or the super lows. So there's that stab, and then I've also got like this other stab, which I've used the same stab for, but I've just played it in and processed it differently. So before that drop there. So yeah, that little stab only happens once in the track, and it's just some different notes. And what I've done to process it is I've used Timeless version 2 because that's some different presets in, but gone into the effects and used like this Oddity thing. There's some crazy presets in the second one. I actually think it's better for those sorts of trippy effects. And then finally we've got this. So initially that is just a vocal sample. So if I take the preset off, the delay off, it's just that. But then I've added in the Timeless 3, and I've gone into some special effects, and it just gives it a real open feel, which adds something to the track when it drops into that new section there to fill it out when things come out. So yeah, in terms of how it's been put together, lots of swing, really short decay, almost acoustic sounding drums, filtered bass, all swinging together, really high swing, little stabs, and then loads of processing on these pitch down spoken word vocals, and everything sort of bouncing off each other in the groove. Really playful, really sort of unique sounds and style. Really, it's quite difficult to get right, but using those sorts of techniques that I've shown you there, hopefully you'll be able to achieve it if that's what you're looking for. But one thing I would say is keeping the tempo high as well, and lots of swung drums, really loopy, almost like a techno style. So yeah, what we'll do is we'll just load up a new project, and we'll see if we can just build like a little small loop from scratch and put some of these things into practice again, and come up with something together. Yeah, we've got this smooth hold on, so yeah, it's got like a bit of an acoustic sounding feel to it. So I'm just going to try and draw a bass line in that bounces with the groove. Yeah, it's a variation on the second phrase, that. I feel like I might want to layer that clap with something else. So if I go back in and I just go into the organic minimal, might go with just the traditional like 909 clap over the top and have that as like an underneath layer. Something like that. See how that sounds. You can process it too, but give that kick a bit more attack and a bit more volume. And then we're going to go for another hat in there as well, I think, just to open it up a little bit. Yeah, so let's go back in, get a drum rack on the job. Yeah. It's phasing with another hat there, so I think it's this one here, so we can take that one. Try and get some textures in. For this I'm going to use Omnisphere, so if we go to type in textures, whoops, scroll down at the bottom actually, and then we've got textures playable. So I'm just getting a note in there, and then I can flick through and find something that fits. Not too sold on that one in terms of the Perlon style. It sounds great, but I lost that one. Pitch it down, I think. It sounded good on the preview. And you can see how you can start to build from there. I mean, it's all about the processing and that sort of thing, and then we can add in like Vox samples. These are the hardest things to find, but there are some. Sorry if that hurt your ears, but something like that even might be usable. So yeah, that's how I'd go about building the drums and the bass line and things like that. And then I go on to process and mix from there using the techniques I showed you in the first clip. So hopefully that's been useful. If you've got any questions, or there's a particular label or style or sound that you'd like me to go through, please let me know in the Discord. And if you're enjoying it, give me some feedback. If there's things that you want to know about, then also let me know, and we can work together to make sure that the content's gonna suit you guys. So nice one. Thanks for watching.